Hi everyone, my name is Ashtongleckman and welcome back to Behind the Score, the series on YouTube where we analyze film scores. Today we're going to be taking a look at my favorite film of the year, and it's one of the only big blockbuster movies to come out this year given coronavirus and everything that's happened. But that is Christopher Nolan's incredible movie Tenet, which takes us into this really unique world and introduces us to multiple characters including the protagonist, Neil, crazy timelines, huge action set pieces, time inversion. It is an experience unlike any other inside of Christopher Nolan's catalog. And the score composed by Ludwig Goransson is immaculate. It's absolutely incredible, and some of the techniques that Ludwig Goransson uses are really revolutionary and new and fresh, and the composition in the score was just something, when I was watching the film for the first time, I was just really impressed and astounded by what he was doing with the music, specifically with all the sonic manipulation and taking a lot of sounds and changing them and inverting them. The score is pretty awesome because he's taking a lot of the ideas of the movie and he's actually putting that inside of the music. So for example, time inversion, this idea that Christopher Nolan created in the movie where you could take the entropy of an object and reverse it. He's doing that with, for example, music elements and voice elements from Travis Scott for the song that they did for the movie The Plan. And he's taking that into the score, inverting it. He's taking a lot of stems from strings and brass and doing some really weird sonic manipulation on that. And of course, there's just a great deal of synthesizers. So we're going to be taking a look at a few cues here. We're going to be looking at the opening of the film, the prologue, which is a sequence in Ukraine, Posterity, which includes the really cool sort of synth sound that he created for the movie. And then we're going to be taking a look at the windmill cue from the opening of the film right after the Ukraine sequence, 747, foils, which is sort of the main theme of the film, and then betrayal. All right, so let's go ahead and dive into the suite. So since I don't have access to the actual, Cubase files or like the actual scores that he used to record the score, all I really had was the soundtrack on iTunes. And so I just tried my best to replicate that. So let's start out with the opening sequence in the opera house in Ukraine. So the first element you're going to really notice when watching the movie is the sound of the guitar, which he actually recorded using his own 8-string guitar. But it's just a really big sort of chugging sound. And I used a sample library from Orchestral Tools, Metropolis Arc 1, and I just took the patch and I used the pitch bend wheel to be able to sort of modulate the sound. And the pitch bend really gives it this sense of instability. And you'll notice with the Posterity synth sound, which sounds like this, he also uses a lot of pitch bend. That sound was programmed by my good friend Joshua Piercy, who's another composer from the Indianapolis area, and he's a really great synth programmer. But there's a lot of pitch bend in the score and a lot of sort of weird modulation to give this feeling like time is moving in a sort of odd direction. And he uses that for, voice samples, for example, from Travis Scott and various other elements. Underneath the guitar bends, we also have this sort of guitar feedback drone. And then we have strings that come in at the bottom, which just has the sense of instability to it. And then we have the main synth arpeggio that just comes in and repeats itself throughout the whole entire cue. So as all these things are happening, people are running down hallways, you have all the people coming into the building, this just keeps it going. It's a super energetic sound. And then the next big element you're probably going to notice when listening to this specific cue is the drum sounds. So these come in and out throughout the movie, and it's sort of like a motif, but here's that on its own. And what that really is it's just a combination of sort of low drums as well as sort of rims. So like the metal casing surrounding a drum, hitting on that. I used a lot of samples, I believe, from Arc 3 and Hans Zimmer percussion, including the bucket hits. But it's really just a combination of sort of metallic sounds, but also that sort of big low impact from a taiko-like drum or a bass drum. And in addition to that, when the drums come in, we also have this bass sound, which is sort of accented along with that. And when doubled with the guitar, you can just hear that. It has a lot of weight to it. And then again, another low drum sound, which is underneath that. And then the biggest element, I think, of the score in regards to the sonic landscape that you're going to notice reoccur all throughout is an 808. So we know Ludwig Goransson's work from Black Panther, and he uses 808s all the time in that score. And he uses it a lot throughout this score in places that you wouldn't normally notice it, actually. In cues like 747, when he's bringing in those big brass sounds, layered underneath is this 808. So that's the thing I love about his musical style and intuition, is he's combining all of these influences, rock and hip-hop and obviously orchestral, traditional cinematic orchestral music, and it really gives it this unique flair. Like what you're listening to doesn't really belong to any one style, which I really love. And so here's what that 808 sounds like. And especially when layered with those low booms, it's got a super aggressive low end bite to it. And then with the drums, and so that just continues to build throughout this cue, as the action is happening, though that synth arpeggio sound, the da-da-da-da-da-da-da, just continues to build, we continue having sonic elements come in and in and in until we build to this huge crescendo about 2 minutes into the cue. But for now, let's just listen to the cue, and then we'll take a look at the EDM section on looks like around bar 57. The guitar feedback drone comes back in. Inverted snap. All right, so for bar 53 through 57, we had this guitar bend, which I actually recorded just using my Fender Stratocaster, and I just used the whammy bar. To just, again, give it this little weird sense of something odd is happening, which, again, he uses all throughout the movie in different sort of sonic capacities. But then we have this sort of airy synth sound coming at the bottom. The strings continue at the bottom end of the mix just to sit at this as this bed. We have another drum element come in. All together. And the thing I love about these percussion hits is they're sort of unexpected. You know, sometimes it goes dun, 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 and then sometimes it goes dun, 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 you know? So it's like it has this sense of you don't really know what's going to happen, which obviously parallels the movie itself, where stuff is completely unexpected, timelines are intersecting all the time, and so the music itself is constantly sort of surprising in that way, which I think, again, is just a really good thing that Ludwig did, which is create that sense of seamlessness between the musical world and the world of Christopher Nolan's film. So we have an electric cello sound, which is just sort of... And again, we're using the pitch wheel to modulate that sound. So now stuff is starting to pick up pace, and if you watch the film, this is essentially where they first get into the room, and then John David Washington and his team start running down the hallway, and that happens right around bar, looks like right around bar 83, so when the 808s come in. So let's just listen to that, and then we'll take a look at what's happening underneath. So in regards to synth sounds, you can hear that right before we go into the 808 section, we have this whole other synth arpeggio that comes in and doubles the original one that we had at the beginning. And that sounds like this. And then this one here. You could tell as we're going along from bar 77 through 78, when we get to the 808 section, the filter is sort of coming off a lot of these instruments. So it's building in tension with the music, but also just the sound itself is continuing to blossom out of using the filter. Then the snares. And then we have the snare sort of fully open in the filter. And in context with the 808s, as well as some of the percussion arpeggios, let's listen to that. Can't forget this one, this is from Zebra. all together there. And the sound that's sort of building there is actually from a library called Novo, which takes original string samples, which are pretty organic, and then transforms them into these sort of weird synth sounds, which is, again, pretty similar to what Goransson does with a lot of the sounds from the movie. Alrighty, so going into Posterity. So the chords here are pretty simple. We just start out with a G major with a third of the bass, and then C minor, D major with a third of the bass, and then an E flat major, 7. You know, and then it just repeats that. So for that section, we just have the piano with the harp. Until we have the Posterity synth sound come in, which again is programmed by my friend Joshua Piercy, and I'll attach his information down below in the description. And so in addition to that, because we're dealing with time, we also have the sound of a ticking clock. And then as we come in, we of course have strings, which are doubling the synth sound. So let me just find those there. And then in addition to that, we of course have these low pulses, which are sort of keeping the thing really heavy in weight. So I'll just play all that together. We're dealing with 808s here. We have these sets of 3. And then the higher strings. And I also want to mention the fact that we're doubling organic string samples with these artificial strings from this library called Symphony from 8dio, which are essentially just like synth sounds that sound like strings. So what we're really doing here is we're combining these low rhythmic arpeggios, the 808s, which are, again, just sort of these big accent sounds. We also have some sort of synth environments that we're creating here. So let me just play the pads. There's this one. And that's from Hans Zimmer's Zebra, by the way. Just super, super minimal. So most of the work is actually being done by these rhythmic elements that are sort of guiding it forward. And so all together, here is Posterity. And we also have the sub bass, which is sitting at the bottom of the mix, reinforcing the low end. And then, of course, we have our sort of Inception. We have our Inception Brahms here, right? What can you do without the Inception Brahms? Sort of just makes you want to go. I had to. Sorry, Hans. Alrighty. So bars 129 through to when windmills start is just sort of this thing that I programmed into the suite just for the sake of, you know, having a transition between these two pieces. So this actually isn't in the film itself. But really all it is it's repeating the chords of Posterity just in long sort of string sounds. And then we go into windmills. And so windmills is based really around the harp sound. So let me just grab a piano and we'll walk through the harmony. It starts out with the harp. And we have that minor 6 interval there. And then we have the low piano. A flat minor, and then we go back to E flat minor, but then we have an F, and then we go into the next cue. In regards to the sort of sonic sound here, we have the harp sitting at the top of the mix, which is sort of in the middle of the keyboard here. And then we have these low synth waves, and then just a really simple, this is like right when you open up Zebra and you just turn on the arpeggiator. This is essentially the sound you'll get. Sounds like that. And then we have these weird sort of sound effects, which is just sort of this sort of throbbing sound that keeps the momentum going inside of the texture. And then we have this high sort of pad sound. And then I programmed, I think I did this one in Hans Zimmer's Zebra. Actually, this specific sound, if you just go into Hans Zimmer's Zebra and you look for Forlorn, this is the sound that you get straight out of that. So it's essentially just this very Dark Knight Rises kind of sound. And the reason I love this sound is because you can just sort of put it in any mix and it just automatically creates sort of an ambience to the mix. And so especially when we bring it in with the strings, you can just hear it has this specific vibe. And with the bass. And again, this is the beginning of the film when he's in the windmill training. And we're using sort of a real low guttural bass from Metropolis Arc 2, which I just love because it has that really organic sort of sound to it. And for all of those chord changes and all the impacts, we have the piano sort of doubling at the bottom. And we also have, for all those changes with the piano, a sort of just a low boom sort of sound effect that go on all those impacts. And this is the noise pulse that's doubling it. You can hear we have that low pad. This is when we bring in the F, high strings. And then we're back on E flat minor. Okay, so this next cue is incredibly fun. The actual sequence is crazy because they actually crashed a plane into a building to do this thing. You know, I'm sure that Christopher Nolan wrote it in the script, and then the executives are like, okay, He's made us some good money on the Dark Knight series and Inception and Interstellar, so why not just give him a plane so he can crash it into a building, which ended up looking incredible in IMAX film. It's just a really cool sequence. But the music itself are these big brass sort of Brahms sounds, but it starts out with these sort of very funny pizzicatos. With some string staccatos, just creating a rhythm. And then it doubles in speed here, right on bar 238. We have some lower staccatos come in there. And eventually, I think it's on bar, 250, we bring in some rims. No, that's actually over here. 255, which are just doubling the strings. So we have the pizzicatos, which come in on C minor, which just have these. And then the... And then over here on bar 255, we bring in the rims. And then the horns start to double the bass. So if we just play those together. So it's just those few elements together. You just have the strings creating the rhythm, the bass below with the melody, and then the horns double it, and then finally we get the big sort of brass sounds over here around bar 269. So let's just isolate all of the Brahms sounds by themselves, and we'll just take a look at each layer individually. So the horns. So here they are. Alrighty, so the first layer of the Brahms sound is low brass from Metropolis Arc 1. So these are essentially just the trombones. Those are the bass trombones. And then we have a synth sound. That's what this one is. Okay, so sort of a bizarre sound on its own, but then when doubled with the brass. We have a chimbasso from Metropolis Arc 1. Again, low brass. So this is from a library, I think it's called, let's just double check. It's called like Super Mega Brass. Okay, fun little interface here. But yeah, it's just sort of a really not great sounding library that when put into a mix with other things actually can sound pretty good. So on its own, it's a bit odd. But then again, when you layer it with organic brass, it sounds pretty cool. And so then we have the 747 horns screeches patch, which is essentially Metropolis Arc 1. I take a French ensemble patch, I think it's 9 horns, and then we put distortion and a compressor on it. And we get... And so all together for the Brahms section. We have 808s on top there too. Alrighty, so now we're on to foils. So foils harmonically is the exact same as windmills, right? We're starting out on E flat minor, and then we go to B flat major, and then it continues going on. But this time we have the guitar as the sort of main driving force of the piece, whereas earlier we had the harp in windmills. So with the guitar as the main sort of center, we're doubling that with a piano, as well as this pad, which is from Oliver Arnold's composer toolkit. It is essentially just this weird, distorted, sort of filtered off piano. Hans Zimmer Zebra with the synth sound. And then this guitar sound is just something I recorded using, again, my Stratocaster. It's just a simple little guitar line that pretty much repeats itself a few different times. Starts out super minimal in regards to the sort of sonic palette. Then we bring in some strings, low synth pulse. We're doubling the guitar with a synth. High synth pad. So right underneath the guitar, I actually just take it, I put it through Guitar Rig, and then I put it through Eventide Black Hole Reverb, and I just put the mix on 100%, and it creates this super ambient sort of pad. And so you could double that with, for example, like synth pads and stuff like that, just to give it this nice, cool, organic feel. And on top of the guitar, it just creates this nice sound. So in regards to all of these different pieces, we can see a lot of similarities. There's a lot of percussive sort of synth sounds sitting at the bottom of the mix. There's always a strong sort of low presence in some way, shape, or form. For example, there's 808s, there's sub basses, there are actual, big orchestral sort of basses that are sitting at the bottom. You also have a lot of pad sounds, which for me really act like glue, just bringing in all of those elements together. For example, like the guitar I just showed you. Another thing that's in common between a lot of these pieces is the motor. So for example, on Windmill, that would be the harp, just keeping things moving forward. On Foils, that would be the guitar. And then on the opening sequence of the movie, the Opera House, that would be the synth sound, which is, again, just keeping the piece moving forward. And so there's a lot of variation. Sometimes there's a melody, sometimes there isn't a melody, sometimes the melody is in the synths, sometimes it's in the low bass. And so that's, I think, what makes the score so cool, is that it's constantly weaving in and out of so many different styles and is really surprising in so many different ways as the score and the movie continues to progress on. So the last cue that we have here is the main theme for Elizabeth Debicki's character, which, if there's sort of a heart of the movie, that would definitely be her character. And her name is Kat in the film. And she has this sort of very tragic story with Sator, who is the main villain, played by Kenneth Branagh, who is sort of not a nice guy, I think. Like, if you were to rate him on a scale like 1 to 10 in terms of like good, being a good guy, he'd probably be like a -10. So all that this really is it's long, drawn-out strings in a C minor chord, and then the bass just moves down. So if I can grab a string patch here. And then you can see as the piece is going on, I'm sort of layering a few different elements in there. We have the sub bass, which is, again, just reinforcing the low end. We have the synth pad, which is layering the top end of the strings. The bass. And then the filtered piano. And then the last element in this piece is the Oliver Arnold's Chamber Grid, which is from a library called, let's see, Oliver Arnold's Chamber Evolutions, I think? Yeah. So this is a really cool library because the sound itself actually evolves over time. So if I just play a chord, you can hear it's sort of evolving as I'm playing it, which is pretty neat. But like, the really cool thing is you can start taking these pegs and combining them in different ways and getting really sort of weird. So that is Tenet. Thank you guys so much for watching this Behind the Score episode. I know 2020 has been a less than exciting year. So many of us sort of pinned up at home, haven't had the opportunity to go to the movie theaters as much as we, would love to as movie geeks. And it's been a bit of a Debbie Downer year, but there's so much to look forward to next year, and I just think that it's a great time to be together with each other's families and enjoy the things that we love most, being music and film and stuff like that. So I'm sending my best to each and every one of you. Please stay safe. I hope that you guys enjoy seeing Tenet on 4K UHD on December 15th, and thank you guys again so much for watching. Please feel free to leave any recommendations down below, and the MIDI file for this cue is available for free if you guys are interested. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and
I'll see you at the beginning, friend.